on these forms of abuse wherever she can, sharing her own personal experience as a survivor of child abuse and domestic violence. Please give it up.
Yes.
Give it up for somebody that's about to bare their soul to y'all this evening. Karista Harris, everybody. Y'all give it up.
Good evening. I am a survivor of child abuse and domestic violence. More than 90% of abusers are people children know, love, and trust. For me, that person was my mother. I was physically and mentally abused from around age 2 until just a few weeks before my 13th birthday. My police report stated the following. Evidence of physical abuse was substantial and included bruises on both of Krista's legs. The rest of the report goes into graphic detail of the level of abuse that I received. The abuse didn't happen occasionally. On one level or the other, I was abused on a daily basis, my entire childhood. There was nothing I could do to prevent her rage at me for even the smallest thing if she felt it was not to her liking. She kept the abuse well hidden from our community by covering up visible bruises and marks with either makeup or clothes, or isolating me from the community until the marks were gone. By age 11, I had tried to commit suicide twice. A few weeks before my 13th birthday, I sought outside help, fearful if I were to be discovered by my mother, I would die. Thankfully, just before my 13th birthday, the police pulled up to our house. My mother told me to hide in the bedroom because my facial and arm bruises were not covered up. However, as the police walked up, for the first time in my life, I gathered up all my inner strength, looked my mom in the eye and said, "Mom, I'm sorry, it's over," and walked out the door without looking back. From that moment, I thought I was entering into a new world, one without abuse and being in fear for my life or safety. Sadly, I was wrong. For me, it was not over. One in 3 women in the United States have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. At age 18, I became that 1 in 3. I met my ex-husband at work, fell in love, decided to get married and start a family. We first started arguing over wedding planning. 2 months into our relationship, I was being pushed and shoved. It eventually escalated into full-blown fights. But since we were days away from getting married and he kept apologizing and saying he loved me, I still agreed to marry him, hoping the wedding would change his behavior. I was wrong. Exactly 1 month to the day after we got married, and I at 3 months pregnant, we argued over returning items to the library to avoid fines. He got angry that he had to return them, and next thing I knew, I was being choked and shoved into the wall. So hard, bruises started forming on my right arm. Then he took his earphones and whipped my bare, pregnant stomach multiple times, leaving bleeding welts. He finally stopped, went and punched some holes in our bedroom and left for work. Fearing for my life, I called 911. I got out of that situation, but still for my son's sake, I tried one more time to make it work. Not only did he remain physically violent, but he started to verbally threaten to kill me. I finally chose to move on. I realized for me and my son that this was a dangerous, toxic relationship. 3 years later, after much personal recovery, I found my current husband, who is my rock. Now, although I had left my ex and remarried, my ex continued to have a hold on me, verbally, emotionally, mentally, and eventually physically until 2014. Mentally, I lived in fear of the days we had to exchange my son because I never knew how he would act. Some days he would threaten to physically harm me or throw things or break things on our property. Thankfully, I had my husband there to stop him, but I was still afraid. As the years progressed, I became fearful not only for myself, but for my son. That fear materialized when my son, after being dropped off, complained of a headache. He then broke down and told me that for almost 8 months, my ex had been beating him and hitting him in the head so hard that he'd get severe headaches, to which he was refused medicine. He didn't tell anyone because he had been threatened by my ex. I told him that it was going to end and that he was safe. Unfortunately, one more event occurred before we could fully close that chapter of our life. National statistics say 1 or more children witness domestic violence every 44 minutes. While picking up my son's belongings from his grandmother's house, my ex came storming in angry that I was taking the stuff as he had lost custody. He grabbed my son's arm and shoved him into the wall. Then he came after me, shoving my head and body into a closed door in front of his son, who ran off and called 911. By the time he was done assaulting me, I had multiple injuries that landed me in the ER. This was the last time my son and I were victims of his domestic violence. We both became survivors. We no longer fear for our overall safety. Yes, there is still mental damage, but we have our lives and we are safe finally. I have learned that if an abuser does it once, they will do it again. That offenders develop a pattern that is easy to become a part of. Abuse, show regret, promise to never do it again, then start the whole cycle again. 1 in 3 women is too many to suffer from domestic violence. For me, I became a victim because that lifestyle was all I knew growing up. To me, that was love. There are so many people from all walks of life who are scared to step out from the shadow of abuse for fear of more abuse or even death. We need to show these men and women that they too can become survivors and not victims. In closing, I want to quote something Will Smith recently said. God placed the best things in life on the other side of terror. On the other side of your maximum fear are all the best things in life. On the other side of my fear of my mother and ex-husband was finding and marrying the best role model, adoptive father, and man in my life, as well as being free from fear of abuse or death and being able to fully enjoy the life I have been blessed with. So if you are in a situation of domestic violence or any form of fear, don't be afraid to step to the other side. Everything you want is on the other side of fear.